Hello, so today we're going to be talking about Castlevania, the game from 1986 on the NES. So I've written about Castlevania before in an article over at 1428elm.com, and here's part of what I said about it. My intro went like, it's 1986, Ronald Reagan is president, and one of the biggest TV shows is Family Ties. Horror is the biggest it's ever been, and home gaming is on the rise. Let's take a look at Castlevania for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's very common for modern gamers to treat old Nintendo Entertainment System games as dusty old relics of a sillier age. However, some NES games just don't feel that way to me. And, I still would say that about Castlevania. And I cannot say I played Castlevania as much as other games when I was younger. I did have some truly great experiences with it, though. As I did with so many games, I'd get home from school, off of the school bus, I'd, play some rock music on a cassette tape, in the old-timey fashion, and I'd sort of, veg out playing some video games, and occasionally Castlevania was one of those games. It certainly made the cut as a great game in my book. So, like I said, it came out in 1986, and it was already well on its way to legendary status at that point. People were definitely aware of the game. You could sometimes talk with people about it, maybe have a strategy for the best way to, battle various creatures or whatever. And take it, I think it already was basically guaranteed success just because of the dominance of horror in the 1980s. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe somebody would have a counter argument, but I think back then, if you had a horror themed video game, it would strike a lot of people like, holy crap. It wouldn't even necessarily have to be the greatest game ever or anything like that. But, some people at it, I think, just gravitate toward it. So I think Castlevania took battles that were already standard to video gaming and made them more dramatic, horror oriented, and atmospheric. And that's part of how Castlevania became an instant classic that remains popular to this day. And it is a challenging game, but not ridiculously difficult. And if a game can strike that right balance, I'm more likely to become a fan of it. Now, I do have to say, I'm not really that much of a gamer these days. This is more of a nostalgia thing for me. I'm not one of those people who does live streaming of games or anything like that. I don't even know really how to do that. I'm amateurish, and I don't really play that many modern video games and all that. So this is just me being a genuine nostalgia nerd type. So it's reasonably, the control on the game is reasonably tight. It's a well-written story, to the degree that a game can be well-written. And I think it's practically impossible to play it and, do it extremely wrong unless you're just not in top form and you're like having a bad day and you're screwing up. My point is, it's not one of those games where the control setup is your biggest challenge, working against you unfairly. It's pretty easy to master the controls of the Belmont character and know how to crack the whip. And after a certain amount of times playing the game, where certain items are going to be located, and you understand the basic dynamics of the game and all that kind of stuff. Castlevania is perhaps the video game most responsible for bringing horror themes and characters into mainstream gaming. I know I've kind of said that already, but it really bears repeating because I think that was one of its innovations. And it's not like the existence of horror games wasn't a thing, but Castlevania kind of took it to another level, I think. It's also an important video game for many reasons, including simply that it became a franchise and you have a Netflix series that was successful, and it's sort of a no brainer as a game to revisit occasionally. And so I guess one of the questions I might close on is is it the case that I prefer Castlevania over other classics like, Super Mario games like Super Mario 1, Super Mario 2, Super Mario 3, or Super Mario World, or maybe Super Mario Kart, or that kind of stuff? Well, no, not really. I'm more of a Mario dude than a Castlevania one. But nobody cares about any of those things if they're already a Castlevania super fan, right? You're just gonna still love that game, and I'm sure there are some hardcore Castlevaniacs. I don't know if that's what you're called or whatever, but I'm sure you're out there, and you definitely appreciate all of the nerdiest info that you can get on the franchise. Everything has that. Like there's Star Wars nerds, and there's this kind of nerd or that kind. And I'm sure some of you are pretty hardcore Castlevania fans. So this game is undoubtedly one of the greatest video games of all time. And that's about all I need to say about it. I don't want to gush about it too much more because I'll sound probably like a bigger fan than I am. But definitely get back into Castlevania sometimes. It's worth it. All right, so have a good day.